In the hushed corridors of time, there are moments that echo with the thunderous footsteps of history. On a fateful day in 1979, the wind of change swept across the Spice Isle, leaving an indelible mark on the pages of its destiny. Like a tempest brewing in the depths of the ocean, the forces of revolution converged, reshaping the political landscape. And as the curtain of power fell, a new era dawned, heralding a chorus of voices yearning for autonomy, justice, and a brighter tomorrow.
Very substantial number of people in our country had decided that the time had come to fight back, that there was no more point in running and ducking.
Welcome, I'm Sherwood McCaskey. In our last episode, our guest discussed the events leading up to the 1976 general elections here in Grenada and the quest of the coalition movement to gain power. What occurred after that? We begin with Dr. Nicole Philip Dow.
Once the 76 elections failed, their gears started changing. How do we take power? Get rid of Gary, but now, not by elections. We're going to have a different way of getting into power.
In the early hours of Tuesday, March 13th, 1979, a movement against one of the region's longest-serving leaders, Eric Matthew Gary, finally found expression in an armed assault on the country's army headquarters. 34-year-old lawyer-politician Maurice Bishop, at the head of a revolutionary army, had created a precedent in the Commonwealth Caribbean, the overthrow of an elected government by armed revolt.
Here Grenada goes again. Only island in the English-speaking Caribbean to have a coup d'etat. Edward Lane's book reads like a film, and to how they got to this point. Different scenarios on how this was going to work. Gary would have actually left the country.
And when the leadership recognized that he left, the call was given to move on Gary on the 13th, the morning of the 13th.
Because he's no longer there to, to rally the forces together.
The reason they gave it was that they were under physical attack, that they felt they were going to be removed.
So the story goes that when Gary was leaving, he gave order for the execution of the revolutionary government.
We say this, that when yesterday we found ourselves forced to take a decision to attack the army barracks this morning, we of course were not sure as to precisely what would happen after that. We found ourselves driven to this course, not only because of the accumulation of daily repression over the past years by the Gary dictatorship, but more particularly because in recent times our people have found two things in particular, just in the last week, that they felt they could not take anymore. One was a very obviously fraudulent, fake, and farcical electoral revision, which they were foisting on the people of Grenada so as to perpetuate further their rule by bullet while pretending the ballot was being used. The second was, Gary yesterday said he was going off to America. Well, he didn't really say, in fact. We managed to find out through our inside contacts. And what we were able to discover in a concrete way from our sources within the army and within the police was that the plan was to time his departure with the mass slaughter of our leadership. And we decided that the time had come when we could not take that. I say that on Saturday last, for example, most of the leadership of our party had to be underground. And over the last 3-4 nights, that is the way in which we had to be. And this had to do with a number of searches which the government had gotten going again. On Saturday, more than 150 policemen searched our respective houses and forced us once again to be on the run. It is clear that the time had come when a very substantial number of people in our country had decided that the time had come to fight back, that there was no more point in running and ducking, being beaten, being murdered, being searched over and over again. All the arbitrariness that has characterized this regime, all the repression, the people had gotten to the point where they felt that the time had come to fight back. A sentiment which we shared, a sentiment which we gave concrete expression in our actions this morning.
It is certain this was hogwash. This was just a piece of good propaganda because there was a movement to have the revolution 2 weeks prior to that date, but it was called off on some technicalities. So it was just a good piece of propaganda, and I am speaking from a position where from that village where things was actually happening. And some of the key players was actually from my village.
They took the decision to stage a coup by attacking the defense force, setting fire to the property and basically taking over the island with a few guns that they had imported via the US. It came down in barrels of grease, supposedly. And they also got help from, of all places, Guyana. They actually trained some of the fighters in Guyana at the time. Most people would have thought it was Cuba, but it really was Guyana under Forbes Burnham at the time.
At this point, there is virtually no resistance. All resistance has been crushed. We have made it clear what our position is. We are not interested in a bloodletting. We do not see ourselves as soldiers or guerrillas. We see ourselves as political people who are concerned to bring bread and justice to our people. We find that we are forced to take up arms because of the situation in our country, and that is the way it was. And right now, the way we see it is that the first task of the new government will be in that order, to restore order quickly, to consolidate our position, and thereafter to immediately begin the job of restoring and indeed expanding those human rights of our people, which they have been deprived of these past 5 years. We already indicated to the American ambassador that we are going to make a formal request in the next few days for the return to Grenada of Mr. Gary. He is desperately wanted here for trial. We want to try him for a number of serious criminal charges which he has committed over the years. Murder, conspiracy to murder, the destruction of our country, the destruction of human rights and fundamental freedoms in our country, massive corruption, massive fraud, virtually everything you can think of. Those charges are waiting. We want Mr. Gary badly. We want him to be tried in our country.
Every morning you kind of turn on the radio to hear what was happening because there was a lot of obvious political activity happening and you kind of always want to keep in touch. We had this very small transistor radio. I could see it now. One of those circular dials. I remember that there was an announcement that the government of Eric Gary has been overthrown.
Government of the criminal dictator Eric M. Gary has been overthrown. The entire army has surrendered and all the arms have been captured. A revolutionary government has been formed. All religious rights and freedoms are now restored. The people's rights to life and private property are hereby restored. The new revolutionary government calls on all the people to defend the revolution. The new government orders all police to remain in their barracks and police stations and to await further instructions which will be broadcast over the stations. Absolutely free and fair elections will be held speedily. The new government wishes to assure all those concerned that the life and property of all foreign residents are safe, guaranteed, and will be protected. The new government looks forward to continuing friendly relationships with all countries.
A peculiar feature of the revolution was a marked absence of bloodshed during the period of upheaval, in contrast to similar experiences in other parts of the world. In the case of Grenada, there was virtually no disruption and no known mass killings, with only 3 deaths in the takeover.
What was the atmosphere on that day? I did a poem. It's called March 13th. And it says, the wind stood still, the bell never sung, screeching tires, slamming doors, and explosion piercing the stillness. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution.
Budlar Cadwell Mucho Nada. armed with guns, dirty and shot, rusty, greasy, sticking bullets, but armed. Cutlass, stones and sticks had they rolled too. Eyes bloodshot, filled with fear, that in uncertain but determined to chase, to eliminate. But bravery, courage, the old manhood in quest. No blood must flow, but bullets must fire. That was March 13th, 1979 revolution. Young angry men chased the despot, their temper boiling, revenge is sweet. So kill, beat, cross the police, the Agirites. Retrench, disobey, lay off the teacher. Imprison, hang, behead the Mongols gang. We, the rebels, would do the job. That was March 13th, 1979, revolution.
It actually captures what it was the mood like on that morning. And so on that morning when the call was given, a contingent from St. George's moved into the Trublo barracks, and they took over. One man got killed, and that is also in the poem. One man got killed. Yes, some Brazilian man got shot down here. But in the area from the north, a whole group of persons, and it is important for me to put that in the context, a new group of persons, one led by Kennedy Boudlal and Kenneth Boudlal, they move on to the taking of all the stations from the Grenville police station to the Paul's Airport, to the Monchos, to the Tivoli police station, to the Hermitage police station. And later in the evening, they move on to Guave. That was the last area to fall on March 13th. And in the St. Patrick area, you had people like James Harry that moved on to the Sotters Police, St. Patrick police station, and etc. And then in St. David, you had the same people like the Teddy Victor and Sebastian and them that move on to the St. David's police station. Later in the day, people like Teddy Victor, then they came up to join forces with the Tivoli contingent, and then they did a mapping up and went right around the island, mapping up areas. So when people saw that as they go to police station, they then confiscate some of the guns, and they added that to their repertoire, to what they had, actually. So that is what was happening on March 13th.
We believe that this is truly a victory for the people of Grenada. The broadest masses of our people, workers, farmers, fishermen, agricultural workers indeed, the youths in particular, the women, the middle classes in general, were all involved one way or another in this particular struggle. We see it as being truly a revolutionary upheaval.
Most of the youths volunteered and moved. There was rastas, there was, ordinary people. Some had stones, some had cutlass, some had guns. Some had Molotov cocktail. Lots of Molotov cocktail was made on the morning of the revolution. Some of the forces, some of the guys that was the Mongols gang, some of them that was the secret police, some of them was mapped up, and then all of them was arrested eventually and brought to the holding areas. So that was March 13th, 1979, and that was the revolution.
Ewart Lane describes it in really minute detail in his book, We Move Tonight, The Making of the Grenada Revolution. They are in the main of the manager's office of Radio Grenada. At least Maurice Bishop was there, Bernard Cord was there, and at least I think Ewart Lane was there. Because Ewart Lane writes it with so much detail as if he really was there. Maurice Bishop and Bernard Cord are members of the Grenada Parliament. They were elected since 1976, right? Members of the People's Alliance ticket, right? And Bernard Cord says, Comrade Prime Minister, you will address the nation at 10 a.m. I have some notes here which I have prepared, and we must get it ready in order to be ready for that time. And Maurice says, but Bernard, we never discussed who was going to be Prime Minister. He tells Maurice, why are you being so modest, Maurice? You are the leader. Everybody else laughed at Maurice because Maurice is being made Prime Minister of Revolutionary Grenada. They say at 7 o'clock in the morning, Maurice Bishop accepted the Prime Ministership of Revolutionary Grenada. It means the revolutionaries kept the office of Prime Minister. Now, when a Prime Minister is appointed, appointed, the Governor General appoints the Prime Minister, not so? And the Governor General, in his opinion, has to appoint the person that he considers to command the leadership of the majority of members of the lower house. Since the parliament is suspended, there is no lower house. And why would Bernard Cord call him, Comrade Prime Minister, you will address the nation at 10 a.m. Now, what does that mean? When I look back at it, Bernard Cord is assuming in principle the position of the head of the state apparatus of revolutionary Grenada. He is the first to recognize Maurice as Prime Minister.
And because they had been talking to the people and linking up with them for quite some time, it was a sort of celebratory. You know, Sparrow had this wonderful calypso about it, you know. Gary and mentioning the names of people who are under pressure.
Gary squander all the money, and the mongoose treat people like bees. Then Bishop take over the country, through party traitors he's deceased.
So Gary had to stay in New York, and the New Jewel movement began their government, and it was a populist government and all that, and began instituting new things in terms of public education, adult education, night classes, and all that kind of stuff. So at the time it was extremely, extremely popular. But the other Caribbean leaders were taken aback by this, and of course fearful that the same kind of thing could happen to them, particularly those like in Dominica and in St. Lucia.
This new leftist brand of politics in Grenada had opened up implications, though, not only for the country, but for the wider Caribbean community. It was in light of this that representatives from all the independent English-speaking Caribbean states, except Trinidad and Tobago, met hurriedly in Barbados to discuss the development. But the Grenadians at home were bent on protecting their revolution.
We believe, however, there are very overwhelming and very good reasons why all the Caribbean countries, independent Caribbean countries, should accord immediate recognition to our government. First of all, the fact that the situation is now completely irreversible. Secondly, the fact that the entire process was conducted so peacefully and in such an orderly fashion. Thirdly, the fact that to do otherwise would be, in effect, to implicitly acknowledge that dictatorship is a good thing for the Caribbean, especially a repressive dictatorship of the character of the Gary regime. Fourthly, because not to do otherwise would perhaps provide a temptation to certain organizations, individuals, such as mercenaries, perhaps even countries, who may at this point be tempted to consider coming in. Now, we see that as being obviously a blatant violation of the domestic rights of Grenadians. It would constitute a most flagrant violation of the rights of the people of Grenada to full control of their own domestic affairs. And obviously, if any such invasion, external invasion, was attempted by whoever attempted, and in whatever manner attempted, the people of this country are undoubtedly going to fight. Undoubtedly. So if there's going to be any success for any such foreign invasion, the success is going to have to be measured in terms of land, not of people who are going to continue to work the country, because it's going to be violently resisted.
The only possibility of any slight harm to the revolution can come only from external sources. And we see basically that there are three external sources from which that kind of activity could come from. First of all, there is Chile, which has, as you know, maintained very close ties with the Gary dictatorship. And it is possible that the Chilean regime may want to attempt to intervene. Secondly, there is the possibility of other governments which have failed to issue a statement of refusal to Gary's call for arms. In the case of the
Canadians and the British, you know, they have both flatly refused any call by Gary for help. And thirdly, there are possibilities of mercenaries and other international gangsters, mafia elements with which Gary has had close links. An external assault is always dependent on the situation with regard to the masses of people of the country. If you control a majority of your population, an external assault must fail. That is why it failed in Vietnam. That is why it has failed in other countries with a similar background. The only way in which they are going to be successful, any governments or mercenaries or organizations or groups or individuals who wish to come in to try to destroy the fruits of the revolution which we have fought for, will be by getting a barren island, because we are going to fight with the last ounce of our strength to defend the integrity of what we have fought for and the gains which we feel we have made so far and the benefits which we intend to bring to the broad masses of our people. Anyone who comes in, they are going to meet armed resistance. We are going to fight. We are going to fight seriously, and we believe a majority of the population is going to be involved in that fight. So they may as well make up their minds, those who may be contemplating armed intervention, that they are going to meet a barren country. They're going to have to wipe out our population.
79 proved to be an interesting, almost a confusing moment for most of us who were children. In Grenada, the politics of the day, the way the parents maneuvered and discussed things, they would say, boy, you're too small, move from there. This is big people speaking. And so you never really got a chance to get these perspectives, but when you moved, you went to a place where you could actually overhear the conversations. And then there was also the conversations, because right in the yard where we lived, there were actually two police officers living in the yard, and relatives to some of those who were still in the force. So again, we had some interesting perspectives, because you had people who were saying, well, you know, I wonder what's going to be the future. I wonder what these jewel boys are going to do, because nobody was kind of clear on what exactly revolution was, what it meant. And then you saw a different kind of army from the police force that you just experienced, say, 3 weeks before, now taking over. People you knew, young people you knew, in the vicinity, people who were just a little older than you were, people who were still, some of them were still in school. And you saw those kinds of things happening.
Well, during our research here in the Spice Isle, we came into contact with Luke Donovan, a Grenadian whose family experienced the wrath of the new type of army described by Richard Simon.
Well, in 1979, I was just 5 years old. You know, I was born in 1974. My father was a Christian Pentecostal minister. Also, his full-time job, if you want to call it a full-time job, was as a social worker under the Gary government. My father is a Trinidadian who came here and married my mother, a Grenadian from Westerhall, and ended up staying here, living here, and building a church here in Westerhall that still stands up to this day. Yeah? And when Morris Bishop overthrew Eric Gary, his men came to our house and arrested my parents. 3 men. I mean, I was a baby, so I'm not gonna say that Morris Bishop knew or he didn't know, but it was Morris Bishop men that came to our house and took my parents. I was told that I was running around in circles screaming. My brother and sister was there, and they put my mother to drive the car. One man sitting next to her with a gun to her head, and the other 2 men had my father in the middle of the back seat, and they were beating him up and took him. And after some miles down the road, they let my mother go, and they took my father, I think, for a couple of days, threatening to do him all sorts of physical harm. And then he was released after those few days, and that that stress and stuff made my father decide to take the family, uproot the family, and take us back to Trinidad, where he's from, you know. And I know for sure my father took me alone first. Yeah, he took me alone first back to Trinidad, and then after my mother came with my brother and sister, who are both older than me. They came after, but it was me and my dad at first. Here we had our own house, everything. We were more or less well set, you know, in life for our future. And we lost everything to go back to Trinidad to start from the bottom. So that's just my knowledge and history of it, my personal family history of it. So I don't have anything against Morris Bishop. I realize there must be some good, because a lot of people revere him up to today, you know. But, you know, when it comes to that and him, I have mixed feelings. I mean, as they say in war, they always have casualties, you know. So, you know, that was a rough period. But I just want people to acknowledge, because I realize that a lot of people talk about 1983. They always talk about 1983, but nobody talks about 1979. And a lot of people was hurt, because I'm doubting that my family is the only family that went through that. I personally heard of another family in Grenada here that they just got a call that, hey, Morris Bishop men is coming for you all. And they flee. They had to just flee and get out of the, leave everything they own and just leave. So a lot of people was hurt in 1979 as well, you know? So not discounting 1979 and 1983 were two very serious and, you know, painful periods in Grenada history. That's all I want people to know, and, you know, especially the youths coming up.
Well, thank you, Luke. And so the echoes of voices once confined to the annals of time resonate with a singular purpose. The tales of struggle, triumph, and the unyielding spirit of a nation yearning for freedom are not mere echoes. They are living threads that connect the past with the present and beckon towards the future. This has been Resilience of the Spice Isle. We will take a pause here for the holiday season and return with the 8th episode on January the 3rd, 2024. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Happy holidays.